It is Sunday, April the 19th. I'm Ali Velshi. It seemed unlikely just weeks ago, but the Democrats' odds of flipping the Senate this fall have increased. Democrats can retake control of the Senate with a net gain of 4 seats, and the influential Cook Political Report just moved exactly 4 races toward the Democrats. Georgia, where the incumbent Jon Ossoff is running, is now leaning Democrat. North Carolina, where the former Governor Roy Cooper is running, is now leaning Democrat. Ohio, where former 3-term Senator Sherrod Brown is likely to be the Democratic nominee, is now considered a toss-up. And even Nebraska, which has long been considered solid Republican turf, has moved from solid Republican to likely Republican. The fact that Nebraska is even shifting a little is telling. Republicans still have the edge in the Senate heading into the midterms, but it's narrowing. And Republicans know it, which is why, with polling showing the public's patience with Donald Trump becoming exhausted, the GOP is looking for ways to get around the will of the people in case it turns against them at the ballot box in November, which it might, and lock in their agenda before the clock runs out. And the biggest agenda item of all is the Supreme Court. Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito are 77 and 76 years old, respectively. Both are reliably conservative. Both are part of the High Court's 6-3 supermajority that has fundamentally reshaped American law on abortion, on guns, on executive power. And given their respective ages, both are potentially approaching the end of their time on the bench. There's no age limit on the bench, but maybe they want to retire. Here's the calculation. Republicans seem to be making the calculation that if either of these 2 justices retire while Donald Trump is president and Republicans still control the Senate, Donald Trump gets to replace them with someone younger, someone who could sit on that court not for years, but for decades. And since Supreme Court confirmations require only a simple majority in the Senate, if the Senate remains under Republican control, Donald Trump wouldn't need the support of a single Democratic senator. Now, this is not a particularly quiet strategy. Just last week, the Senate Judiciary Committee Chair, Chuck Grassley, said his committee is fully prepared to process a Supreme Court nomination if a justice retires, even floating the names of Senator Mike Lee and Ted Cruz as potential replacements if Alito were to step down. The Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, also made it clear that Republicans are prepared to confirm a replacement before the midterms if the opportunity arises. But the legal analyst Elie Mystal, writing in The Nation, suggests that Thune's statement may be directed less at the public and more at Alito himself. As Mystal put it, this might be Thune's way of telling the justice, buddy, leave while you still can. In other words, Thune knows the Senate math better than Alito does, and this is his way of saying a window might be closing. Meanwhile, an advocacy group called Demand Justice is already mounting a multi-million-dollar campaign to oppose any Trump Supreme Court nominee, warning that Trump could make not 1, but 2 picks before his term ends. And Trump has made no secret of his intentions. In an interview on Wednesday with Fox Business, he pointed to the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who declined to retire under President Obama and then died during Trump's first term, creating an opening for Trump to appoint Amy Coney Barrett in what many read as a barely veiled warning to Alito and Thomas.
You know, there's a theory. You reach a certain age and you give up your seat if you have the president. Well, look what happens to Justice Ginsburg. She decided that she was going to live forever. And about 2 minutes after the election, she went out and I got to appoint somebody. So, you know, you make the case that at a certain time, you give it up so that you can have a justice. You know, the average is like 40 years. It's a long time. So that your ideology, your policies, your everything would be of the kind that we like.
40 years, that's the goal. Just keep in mind, it's not a conservative court. It's a MAGA court. Out of step with the average American, locked in for decades. And if you want to understand what this court could look like going forward, look no further than Clarence Thomas, the oldest member of the court's conservative bloc and also the subject of some retirement speculation. On Wednesday, Justice Thomas delivered a striking speech at the University of Texas, ostensibly to honor the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. But what he delivered instead was a bitter, grievance-soaked address that distorted history, conflated movements separated by decades and continents, and amounted to what scholars described as misinformed at best and deliberately misleading at worst. Here's a clip.
Progressivism seeks to replace the basic premises of the Declaration of Independence, and hence our form of government. It holds that our rights and our dignities come not from God, but from government.
Okay, there was a lot of speech there and there's a lot to discuss. But Thomas's central argument is that progressivism and the Declaration of Independence are incompatible, that Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, and Mao were all products of the progressive movement. He also suggested that colleagues on the bench who seek compromise lack moral courage, dismissing them as institutionalists and pragmatists, as if those things are insults. In response to the speech, the former federal judge J. Michael Luttig, one of the most respected conservative legal minds in the country, did not mince words. He called it, quote, the explanation and justification for Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, and even the but-for cause of January 6, 2021. He went further, calling it a shocking, ahistorical characterization, not just of liberals, but of conservatives. This is one of the country's most prominent conservative legal voices accusing a sitting Supreme Court justice of laying out the intellectual blueprint for something like January 6th. So what exactly did Justice Thomas get wrong here? He characterized progressivism as a foreign anti-democratic import from Germany, of all places, claiming that it led directly to the worst atrocities of the 20th century. Historians and legal scholars, including Justice Luttig, were swift and unsparing in their response. Far from being a foreign import, the progressive era was an organic response to the excesses of the Gilded Age, to child labor, to corporate monopolies, to systematic political corruption. It was backed by Republicans and Democrats alike, including Teddy Roosevelt, who ran on a Progressive Party ticket. Consider that the founders themselves were divided on the question of concentrated power. Hamilton believed in a strong, active federal government. Jefferson feared that. That tension has always been at the heart of American democracy. It was never resolved by declaring one side the enemy of the republic, because that's not how a democracy works or should work. Thomas's version of history doesn't just distort the facts, it weaponizes them, deliberately conflating American progressivism with European authoritarianism across time and across continents and across entirely different political traditions. As Luttig explains, Thomas assigns to modern American progressives responsibility for the failure of regimes across the world over more than a century. In Luttig's world, it is an individuous comparison, placing American progressives alongside Stalinists, Maoists, and Nazis. But Luttig's most devastating observation is this, quote, for 250 years, it has never been the case that either of America's two political parties has been anti-declaration or anti-constitution, until the past 10 years, when the Republican Party, led by Donald Trump, is unquestionably both, end quote. As a matter of constitutional reality, Luttig argues, it is today's MAGA conservatives who are increasingly rejecting the principles of both founding documents. And if Thomas's radical historical revisionism wasn't enough, in a moment of staggering irony, he closed his speech by thanking his dear friend, the conservative megadonor, Harlan Crow, by name. The same Harlan Crow who, according to a ProPublica investigation, spent 2 decades gifting Thomas luxury vacations, yacht trips, and private travel. The justice who had just finished warning the room about moral corruption and ideological seduction turned in the same breath to thank his billionaire benefactor. Perhaps what Thomas sees as fidelity to the Declaration of Independence is in plain sight something else entirely. It might just be cronyism.